Good morning, Grace Life Kids Summer Camp volunteers. It is so great to have you here for this training. We're going to have a great time today. We're going to try to keep this as concise as possible. We're going to try to let you out of here quickly. Many of you have already done this. You've done this multiple years. So it's kind of insulting to make you go through a lot of training. So we don't want to do that. If this is your first year, make friends with somebody who's done this before, because they'll help you out. They'll kind of guide you through the process of the things you may not understand. There's some changes that we're making this year, and one of them is that instead of having crews, they're called families, but they're basically crews. We're trying to apply a biblical principle, which we think is really cool, and that is where the younger are taught by the older. And so that's our reason for mixing the ages. And we're going to try this. If at the end of this year we see it's a real mess, we probably won't do it again, because we're not like a denominational church that starts something and has to do it for the rest of their lives. So we're going to be fine. Just bear with us as we try it. We think it's a biblical principle. We think that by putting like fifth graders with kindergartners, that what will happen is it calls the fifth grader up to be an example of the group instead of being a child. And the K-5 kids and the first graders, they look up to these fifth graders. I've noticed that when they look at adults, they're like, oh, you're just an adult. But they look at a fifth grader or a fourth grader and they're like, wow, I'm going to be like him or her very quickly. And so they're excited about that. Teens get excited about teens serving too. So those of you who are teens and you're leading a family or helping to lead a family, you're vital to this process. All of you are vital to this process, don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to cover some of the things that are a little different this year. The rest of the things that we're doing are very similar to what we did last year. You know, we're going to have a play on the front side, that first assembly. Ella Bittner's going to lead us through some songs with the sixth grade girls. I think there may be some boys in that as well. We're happy to have that. And then we're also going to be having crafts are kind of embedded in the marketplace. And so you'll see that as you go. And boy, we're so thankful for these 10 marketplace leaders that are going to be helping with, literally, you're helping teach about how the underground church worked in that day, how the underground church works today. And then, of course, we have this aspect called the catacombs, which is part of the Bible story where the kids will go and they'll hear from Steve Sonnen about where the church has to meet and how even today churches meet in different places in order to stay safe because the authorities don't want them to meet. They don't like these churches. They don't like these people who are part of these churches. So we're going to be exposing our kids to a lot of really big stuff, but fear not, they're up to it. It's going to be exciting. They're going to learn a lot. And you're going to learn a lot as you participate in this. So I'm super excited about that. I wanted to share some scripture with you because I think it's really important that we think in terms of, okay, so why are we doing VBS and what's the biblical basis for that? As you know, Jesus was a rabbi. And rabbis were teachers, and they were well respected in Israel. Everybody called them rabbi. It was a form of respect, and Jesus was one of those. And so people would come to him with questions, and they would say, hey, rabbi, what is this or what is that? So all of you are helping teach this week, and kids are going to come to you with questions. But Jesus had people that started coming to him as a rabbi, and this was not very customary in that day because children weren't spoken to. And interestingly enough, women weren't spoken to by men. So Jesus broke all the rules, which was really cool. He took women into account. He valued them as God values them. He valued children as God values children. So he disrupted what was wrong with the culture. And we should never be afraid of that. If God breaks into a culture and disrupts it with his things, we should always be like, wow, I'm so glad, because we want to be a Christian culture, not necessarily a culture that just conforms to whatever the culture say. We always want to question it against God's word. So it says, then, and I'm reading, if you're following along, in Matthew chapter 19, it says, verse 13, it says, then children were brought to him, speaking of Jesus, that he might lay hands on them and pray. And so what was the first thing the disciples thought to do? They started rebuking the people who were bringing their kids to Jesus. You say, wow. We actually have people that come every Sunday and bring their kids here so that some of you can teach them. So it would be like having somebody in the parking lot that as you're walking up to church with your kids saying to you, hey, you really shouldn't be bothering Jesus with your kids. Can you imagine that happening? We can't imagine that today. But in that day, you didn't bother a rabbi with something like children. And what's so cool about Jesus, he's like, Jesus turns it on. Because when the Bible says rebuked, I've always thought it'd be really cool if the Bible was set to video. And it's not. But I can just imagine Peter and James and John out there trying to calm these parents and these moms. There's nothing like a mom that wants her kid blessed by Jesus, right? So here's the moms, and they're coming at Peter and James and John. They're like, hey, get away from here. I can see the scene in my head. I can imagine they probably weren't mean, but they were rebuking them. And that word rebuke in the Greek is a very strong word. And so what's interesting about this, Jesus turns it on them and he says to them, let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of heaven. Now, there's a whole lot in there. I'm not going to preach a sermon to you, but I want you to know that the kingdom literally, Jesus says something here that's as a church, we can't ever forget this. The day we forget this, we're done. In other words, this stops growth in any church. When you forget that the kingdom of heaven belongs to children. Now, Jesus was going somewhere with this, and this is a big deal. He wasn't just saying that it belongs to children in stature. He's saying it also belongs to people who are children in their faith. In other words, we have a simple faith as an adult. So I can be, in my 60s, I can be like a child in my faith. In your teens, students, those of you who are serving, you can be like a child in your faith. And those of you who are middle-aged, you can be like a child in your faith. And so that's what Jesus is trying to show us. And what's cool about children? Well, you can tell children pretty much anything, and they believe it. The good thing about the gospel is that the gospel can be confirmed through the Old Testament, and now we have the New Testament to back it up, but we can always go to the Old Testament. We can confirm the gospel, that God loved the world and He sent His Son Jesus to die in our place so that we could be free. And it takes a childlike faith to believe that. Sometimes I'll kid around with my little granddaughter. She's 3.5. And she's learned that sometimes I'm kidding, and I'll say something and it's a little off, and she'll look at me and she's like, Papa, are you kidding? And even they are perceptive enough to know when somebody is just kind of not telling them the truth. But when we come at them with the gospel, and that's what Jesus did, he just shared His love with them. Notice what He says. It says, and He laid His hands on them and went away. Very simple. So it was just and this was a big deal in that culture, laying your hands on them. Now, what's interesting that pardon me, what's interesting that happens in Matthew 19. Guess what's the story that follows this encounter with the children? And that's why I love the way it works out in Matthew. The thing that comes immediately after that, verse 16, after verse 15, where it says He lays hands on the kids and went away, it says, behold, a man came up to Him saying, and this is the story of the rich young ruler who comes immediately after this. And all he can think of is, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? Now the children, the moms and the children and the parents that brought these kids to Jesus, they knew that they just needed to be in contact with Jesus. This young man, he thinks, what do I have to do? He's been jaded by the world. His heart's gotten hard. And so I feel sorry for the rich young man. I really do. But he's a picture of so many people who think the world's made him hard, sin's made him hard, kind of like we talked about last Sunday about the locusts. They eat away at your life, they haul you out, they dry you out, and then you get cynical. The blessing that we have is that of these 200, however many kids that are coming, so many of them aren't cynical yet. Now, some of them have probably seen some pretty rough stuff in their homes. Some may even have parents that are incarcerated. You never know. But here's the cool thing. Most people come to faith in Jesus Christ before their 21st birthday. And so we have a unique opportunity this week to bring the gospel to them and to share this with them. So I wanted to kind of give you the biblical basis for why we're doing summer camp, Grace Life Kids Summer Camp. The second thing I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of connect this for you to CORE, because this is what we do around here. CORE is kind of our basic structure for discipleship. And if Justin were here, he would say, oh yeah, everything we do has to have those 4 elements, because he's embraced that concept, as many of you have as well. So thank you. But the first one is community. So here's a real simple thought. Let your kids begin to create community. It's going to happen in your group. Your kids are going to begin to create their own little community. Our prayer is that even after summer camp, after summer camp's over, they're still going to see each other in the hallway and high five and talk to each other, and the older, younger thing is going to keep happening, that this won't end at summer camp. So community is essential. Jesus said 2 are better than 1. Jesus said it's not good that man should be alone, and I think when he said man, he meant everybody. So I think that that's the first piece. So we want to allow community to happen. So if that means that sometimes you have to kind of interrupt the community to say, hey, listen to what the teacher's saying or pay attention, that's okay. But when it's not, let the community flow. Let them talk about what's going on in their lives, what they're doing, what they like, what they don't like. That's community. The outreach piece is huge here. A lot of these boys and girls may know Jesus Christ already. We're good with that. A lot of these boys and girls may not. And so what I would ask you, what I would beg you to do, is to make sure that you take the time to get to know your kids, get to know where they are spiritually. And you don't pressure them, don't make them feel weird or odd or anything like that. Just say, you can ask them, hey, have you ever placed your faith in Jesus Christ? And if they say, no, I don't really know what that means, that opens the door for you to share the gospel, as we've trained you to do that already. Those 5 steps that we go through every time, they're very simple. You're going to have that, it's not only going to be available to you in all the different things we have, but we're sending home those amazing cards with the kids every day. And on one side, it has a message for the parents. On the other side, it has a message for the kids. And all of that contains the gospel. So every day is gospel day. Every moment is gospel moment. So we want to make sure that the outreach piece is happening. What is outreach? It means reaching beyond yourself. So as you interact with the kids, think about them ahead of yourself. If they're afraid, think of how you would feel. If they're acting out, kind of try to figure out. Ask questions. Don't just ask them. Say, so what's going on? Why are you feeling this way? What's bothering you? Are you afraid of something? Are you upset? What's going on? Try to get to know the kids, but reach to them. That's what outreach is all about. Then the replication piece, and this is huge. Those of you who are teenagers and those of you who are adults who are working with our kids, befriend somebody that's just a little bit younger than you, and do your best to encourage them to call them up to bigger things. I had a great conversation with a lawyer who's working with us on our bylaws, and he was shocked that we allow our 16-year-olds in our church to vote. And he said if they become members, they're allowed to vote on anything that we have to vote on as a church. And we don't vote on a lot. We try to avoid votes. But if there is a big thing, we involve the entire church because we believe in that. And interestingly enough, his name's Justin. And Justin said to me, he said, Dave, are you guys sure, because there was a whole team of us talking to him, are you guys sure that you really want 16-year-olds making decisions about your church? I said, let me tell you what's wrong with our culture, in my opinion. Instead of calling people up to bigger things, we're extending adolescence. I said, that's why you find 25 and 30 and 35-year-olds that are behaving like 17-year-olds. And I said, so in our church, we believe that God's called us to, not prematurely, but call people up to bigger things. So if there's a 5th grader Think about that next year, that 5th grader is going to be in student ministry with Ryan and all his team. Go ahead and call them up. Hopefully they'll start becoming, he or she will start becoming a leader in student ministry next year as they graduate out of this. Even a 4th grader, call them up and let them help you lead as you do things, okay? So that's the replication piece. Find somebody younger than you, somebody that may be less bold than you, maybe a little more intimidated, and pull them alongside and give them some tasks and say, hey, can you help me with this? And when we do that, other people begin to connect. The last piece, not less important, is the education piece. I grew up in Spain. And in Spain, there's 2 kinds of education. I know in America we call it differently. We say it differently, but I'll explain to you how it works in Spain. A person who can't read or write, we say they don't have education. And what we mean by that is that they're basically illiterate. They can't read or write. They haven't had the privilege of going to school. So like I had a friend who was a millionaire, literally. And yet he was really good with math, but I would hand him something, he couldn't read it. A great friend, he's now passed into eternity, but his name was Placido. And he had only gone to school until 2nd grade. And then he was sent to the fields to watch his father's sheep in a region called Extremadura, which is towards Portugal. And he came to Madrid with a cheese and a ham on his shoulder. And a ham would be a leg of a pig about this big, and a cheese, and he would pick up bread as he went, and he came barefoot to Madrid. He made a fortune. That's one kind of education. But he always had the other kind of education. That's what allowed him to become a successful entrepreneur in Madrid. And that education is what you get from your mom and your daddy. And we as a church should be the ones who reinforce what mommy and daddy are saying at home as well. So, please, always in order, thank you. May I suggest, instead of just commanding, all those things indicate that you've had an upbringing that is, as we say in Spanish, he has educación. When someone bursts into a place and is rude and impolite, as we say in English culture or American culture, that means that person has either, they'll say they have no education or they have bad education. And that means they've grown up in an environment. So some of your kids are coming from environments where it's okay to curse, it's okay to yell, it's okay to be nasty. And that's what they know. They know it from their home. They're probably not allowed to do it in school, but they may try. And so what we want to do is we want to not only educate them spiritually, but we want to educate them emotionally as well. Because those two work together. Our soul and our spirit work together in our life. So we want to kind of educate them and in both of these ways. And the way you do it is by being kind, polite, all those good things. So we're excited to have you serve at VBS, and I'm excited to see how God's going to use you this week to do great things for God's kingdom, make an eternal difference in the lives of these kids. And I can't wait to see what God does, because we don't like to give God numbers, but I would love to see a whole bunch of kids come to know Jesus. And I'd also like to see all of our kids grow this week as they think about how blessed we are to live in this country that was founded on Christian principles, where we said to a nation called England that wanted to just control us and tell us to basically almost worship the king. And those great Puritans and Congregationalists of that day said, no, this isn't right. And you know, it fits because we're right around the 4th of July. Help our kids to understand how blessed we are as a people, and that people made sacrifices hundreds of years ago, 250 years ago. They sacrificed, as Benjamin Franklin said, we must hang together or we will all hang separately. And he wasn't kidding. They knew they were putting their lives on the line. So know that we as a church must inspire our children to be grateful for the freedoms they have. And so I hope you'll have a great week. We want to have fun this week. And we've done everything we can to make the environment fun, to put all the pieces together. I am the director of this in name only. Everybody else has a piece and they're doing their part. Today I'm building. So Kathleen was gracious enough to come in today, make this recording. I'm actually teaching this Sunday. That was poor planning on my part, but I really wanted to teach both sections of Joel. It's one of my favorite books of the Bible, and so the elders agreed. So I can't be in here in person, but I hope this will do. And again, I'm excited to see you next Monday as we take off in this great adventure called Rome, Paul, and the Underground Church. See you guys. Take care.